Hello, we are group 6, and my name is Christina, and my group and myself will be reviewing the 2 articles from Toyin Falola entitled Hospitality to Hostility and Neighbours at War. We will be explaining some of the key arguments of Toyin Falola about politics and economy of Southwestern Nigeria between the years of 1830 to 1950s. This paper will also discuss changes and continuities, causes and effects, as well as the international economic and political contexts relevant to both articles. I'd also like to give a moment for my co-presenters to go ahead and introduce themselves so we know who is speaking on which part.
Hello everyone, my name is Hassan Mahamoud, a student of University of Abuja.
Hi, my name is Ogleta Walamide.
I first would like to discuss Neighbours at War, conflict over boundaries in colonial Nigeria. Again, this is written by Toyin Falola. This is a comprehensive examination of the complex dynamics of intergroup conflicts in Africa, particularly focusing on the historical, socio-cultural, and political factors that contribute to tensions between neighboring communities. Falola, a prominent historian, explores how issues such as land disputes, ethnic rivalries, and colonial legacies have fueled conflicts across the continent. Through meticulous research and analysis, Falola sheds light on the underlying cause of these conflicts and offers insight into potential solutions for fostering peace and reconciliation among neighboring communities. The book serves as a valuable resource for scholars, policymakers, and anyone interested in understanding the root causes of intergroup conflicts in Africa.
Colonial taxation policies caused a series of crises and intensified competition over resources. And taxation was one of the major aspects of political change of colonial era that generated a number of crises. And then forest resources, notably timber and white rubber, were lucrative as well, and consideration of profit began to affect issues of land tenure and boundaries. As the cultivation of cash crop increased, so too the movement of new frontier and the attendant clashes over ownership. And the profit to be gained include various people to contest the ownership of frontier and their resources. Colonial policies challenge indigenous authority and even their own citizens who claim potentially profitable areas as belonging to their member of the family, as communities and people sought to collect concession, and they put up competing claims, and there were many conflicts arising from frontier lands. Despite administrative measures, and violence persisted, and communities sought to contest colonial hegemony.
The colonial policies challenged indigenous authorities and reshaped traditional land tenure system. What I mean by that was the fact that the colonial government added its own dimension in creating new districts, divisions, and provinces. The government drew lines to separate people and places into various units. The creation of separate administrative units and the separation of communities could become a source of grave danger, where the people did not accept the line as fair and factual. Two big fight becomes one: the fight over land, that was the first, and the fight over administrative units. Indigenous community were faced with a dispossession and loss of citizenship within their own ethnic identities. Those who occupy the piece of land knew whom they should give political allegiance to. In the split into divisions and the district, a person could be living on the land under the jurisdiction of a king but be asked to pay taxes to a separate administration unit. According to Toyin Falola, From the cases that led to conflict and violence, a set of three patterns were emerged. The first pattern was the conflict over boundaries, and the second was the conflict over frontiers land, and the third was the conflict over the creation of new administrative. We are going to be concluding this part by looking at the various reactions of the then colonial masters in order to curb this conflict among the people and in the community. There was this establishment of boundary settlement commissions. Colonial government established commissions to address boundary disputes. Enlightening the widespread natures of conflict, the government wanted people to respond to its changes, but the stress on history and tradition was crucial to communities. An Oba means a king. A king presiding over the native authority could not want to lose his power, and was very inconsistent that his people must show him allegiance, but the people must live in areas where they wanted to give their allegiance to another king.
Now for the second reading that we analyzed, which was Hospitality to Hostility, again by Toyin Falola. The rate at which Ibadan expanded its large population and system of government has attracted the attention of scholars, and one of the central themes in these works is the role, importance, and status of strangers in Ibadan. Nearly all the writers on Ibadan history have commented on the ease in which strangers were accommodated, as well as the opportunities open to them to achieve fame, wealth, and success at Ibadan. The first was that she opened her door to all adventurers within Yoruba country and evolved a system of government which, unlike that of most of the other Yoruba towns, had a definite military bias and made its titles open to all competitors regardless of their birth and place of origin. This ensured that Ibadan always enjoyed the services of its best men. These men, regardless of their place of origin, had equal opportunities and could acquire wealth, power, and status. Just as a man of ability could, no matter his sub-ethnic or family antecedents, rise to any position in the state, so could he, if he was so inclined, acquire considerable wealth as a farmer or a trader or artisan. For instance, there was in Ibadan nothing like the traditional Yoruba land tenure system, whereby all the land belonging to a town was broken up into inalienable lineage holdings. On the contrary, every man was free to cultivate as much of the Ibadan countryside as he was able to reclaim from the forests. At Ibadan, rules and regulations were relaxed to accommodate the eccentricities of war chiefs and the excess of common soldiers, partly in order to retain them and partly to emphasize
to define who an indigene of Ibadan should be. The definition was simple. The Oyo Yorubas, driven away from their homelands by the Fulani, it was emphasized that the following Yoruba subgroups should be regarded as kinsmen: the Ede people, the Iwo people, the Oshogbo, the Ikirun, the Ilora, the Ogumosho, the Oyos, and relative settlements that surrounded them. The people from this area were not to be treated as strangers or discriminated against. The following were strangers: all the non-Yoruba people, including the Ife, the Ijebu, the Ijesha people, the Ekiti people, the Igbomina, and the Akoko people. These economic changes brought by colonial rule also changed Ibadan attitude to strangers, of course. The Ibadan wanted to dominate the rubber industry. And these have been predominantly dominated by the Fante people. And so the also the land that were used for cocoa cultivation. These ambitions brought them into conflict with the Fante and the Hausa people and the Ijebu people and the Egba people. Let us look at sources of historical work of Toyin Falola in the two journals. In Neighbours at War, conflict over boundaries in the colonial Nigeria, and from Hospitality to Hostility, Ibadan and Strangers, 1836 to 1904, Toyin Falola relies on a diverse array of primary sources to construct his analysis of boundary conflicts in colonial Nigeria. By drawing upon a diverse range of primary sources, including colonial archives, oral histories, missionary records, court documents, and personal accounts, Toyin Falola enriches his analysis of boundary conflict in colonial Nigeria, offering a multifaceted announced understanding of the historical complexities involved. These primary sources include, first, the colonial archival, the second, indigenous oral history. Toyin Falola incorporates oral histories and narratives from indigenous communities affected by boundaries conflict. This oral account offers a perspective and experiment that may not be captured in written record, providing the multiple layers of details, patterns, or mini understanding of the social and cultural dimension of boundaries disputes. The colonial government also brought about with it a different concept of geography and cartography. The stories could clearly demarcate shifting boundaries or capture the long-term consequences of gifts and exchanges. But the story could not define boundaries in such a way that were permanently coded. They had to be passed down by words of mouth. Indeed, as all the archival material reveals, no towns had anyone knowledgeable enough to know all its boundaries. So kings and chiefs collected their own information from families, members in border zones, and villages held outside of the cities. Lineages knew the extent of their own land, of course, sometimes having resolved conflict with other lineages. These stories could not define boundaries with precision. Of course, colonial histories have been enriched with claims and counterclaims, mainly on the grounds of tradition. To summarize it all, the article Neighbours at War Over Boundaries in Colonial Nigeria, and From Hospitality to Hostility, Ibadan and Strangers, 1830 to 1904, from Toyin Falola, serves as a vital reading for anyone and everyone interested in finding out about the complex political, economic of Southwest Nigeria during the 1830s and the 1950s, of course. Falola reveals the complex system of power relations, economic shift, and social upheaval that define this crucial time through careful study and analysis. The boundaries disputes in colonial Nigeria epitomize the intricate interplay between economic pressures, indigenous responses, and colonial interventions. Understanding the historical nuances of this conflict is imperative for reconciliation and inclusive development in post-colonial Nigeria. Toyin Falola essay From Hospitality to Hostility, Ibadan and Strangers, 1830 to 1904, and Neighbours at War, Conflict Over Boundaries in Colonial Nigeria, offer valuable insights into the political, economic of Southwestern Nigeria from 1830s to 1950s. And I would say that both essay highlight changes and continuities in the region's political and economic landscape, examining their causes, effects, and international context. Thank you so